She watched her own mother's funeral through a 6-inch phone screen while her husband's girlfriend wore her dress downstairs. The live stream was grainy. A small church, 12 mourners, a closed casket draped in white flowers that Elena Harlow had paid for 3 months ago, back when her mother was still alive and still pretending the diagnosis was manageable. Back when Elena still had access to her own bank account, her own car, her own front door. Now she had none of those things. What she had was a bedroom with the lock reversed, a phone with 18% battery, and a view, through a window she could not open, of the driveway where her husband's silver sedan was parked beside a red convertible that belonged to a woman named Tessa Lee, who was currently downstairs in Elena's kitchen, wearing Elena's black lace dress, the one Elena had saved 4 months of grocery budget to buy for this exact occasion, her mother's funeral, and drinking coffee from Elena's favorite mug while Elena's husband laughed at something on his phone. The live stream showed the pastor speaking. Elena could not hear the words. The audio was cutting in and out, buffering, the particular cruelty of technology failing at the exact moment when technology was the only connection she had left. She pressed the phone against her ear. She heard fragments. Beloved, devoted, at peace. Her mother was dead. Her mother was being buried. And Elena was locked in her own bedroom because her husband, Marcus Belworth, had decided 3 days ago that her grief was inconvenient and her presence at the funeral was unnecessary, and that the appropriate response to a wife whose mother had just died was to take her car keys, reverse the bedroom lock, and inform her through the door that she was being hysterical and needed rest. Rest. As if rest was what a person needed when their mother was being lowered into the ground and they could not be there. As if rest was possible when the sound of laughter was drifting up through the floorboards. Tessa's laughter, bright and careless. The sound of a woman who had moved into someone else's life the way a bird moves into an empty nest, settling into the spaces left by someone else's absence. Elena sat on the floor of her bedroom. The phone screen flickered. The live stream froze on an image of the casket, halfway into the earth, suspended between the world of the living and whatever came after. She stared at it, at the white flowers, at the 12 mourners, none of whom were her. She did not cry. She had cried for 3 days straight after the diagnosis. She had cried when the hospice nurse called to say it was time. She had cried when Marcus told her she could not attend the funeral because they had dinner plans with Tessa and his mother, and he was not going to rearrange his social calendar for a cleaning woman's burial. A cleaning woman. That was what he called her mother. That was what his family had always called her mother. Ruth Harlow, 61 years old when she died. A cleaning woman. As if that was the totality of a human being. As if the 37 years Ruth had spent building a cleaning business from a single mop and a bus pass, scrubbing floors in office buildings and hotels and private homes, raising a daughter alone, paying rent on time every month, keeping food on the table and lights on and hope alive in a 2-bedroom apartment that smelled like bleach and determination. As if all of that could be reduced to 2 words and a dismissive wave of Marcus Belworth's manicured hand. The phone died, 18% to 0 in the space of a frozen casket image. The screen went black. Elena saw her own face reflected in it, pale and thin and bearing the particular expression of a woman who has been compressed for so long that she has forgotten what her full dimensions look like. She set the phone down. She looked at the locked door. She looked at the window that did not open. She looked at the room that had been her cage for 3 days and her diminishment for 4 years, and she felt, in the deep place where grief lives next to rage, something shift. Not break. Shift. Like tectonic plates. Like the ground itself deciding, after years of pressure, to rearrange. She was done. She did not know yet what done meant. She did not know what was waiting for her on the other side of this feeling, what weapons she possessed, what power she had been sitting on without knowing. She only knew that the woman on the floor of this locked room was not the woman who was going to walk out of it. That person was already gone, buried alongside her mother in a church she could not reach. The person who would emerge was someone else. Someone who had been compressed long enough to become diamond. But diamonds, as Elena was about to learn, were only valuable when someone finally held them up to the light. For years earlier, Elena Harlow had married Marcus Belworth in a courthouse ceremony that lasted 11 minutes, and that his mother, Cordelia Belworth, did not attend. Cordelia's absence was not an oversight. It was a statement, a communication, delivered through the medium of an empty chair that the Belworth family did not recognize this union and did not intend to pretend otherwise. Marcus was the only son of the Belworth name, a family whose wealth was moderate but whose social aspirations were immense. And Elena Harlow, daughter of a cleaning woman, graduate of a community college, employed as an administrative assistant at the very firm where Marcus worked as a junior account manager, was not the daughter-in-law that Cordelia had spent 26 years cultivating her son to deserve. Elena had known this. She had known it when Marcus proposed, quickly, quietly, in the parking garage of their office building, with a ring that she later discovered he had purchased on a payment plan. She had known it when he suggested the courthouse rather than a church, when he failed to invite his family, when he introduced her to his colleagues as my wife without the pride that usually accompanies the phrase. She married him anyway, because she loved him, because love, at 23, is a force that overrides the evidence, because Marcus in the early months had been kind, not generous, because generosity requires sacrifice, but kind. The basic, minimum viable kindness of a man who opened doors and remembered birthdays and said you look nice when she wore the dress she could afford, which was never the dress she wanted, but was always the dress she could manage on an administrative assistant salary. The marriage changed him, or rather, the marriage revealed him. The version of Marcus that had courted her, the attentive young man in the parking garage with the payment plan ring, was a costume. Beneath, it was a man who had been shaped by his mother's values the way clay is shaped by hands, molded into the particular form of a person who evaluated everything and everyone by a single metric. What do they do for my status? Elena did nothing for his status. She diminished it. She was the cleaning woman's daughter at the firm dinners, the community college graduate at the cocktail parties, the wife whose wardrobe was insufficient and whose social graces were learned from necessity rather than inheritance. She was the thing that Marcus's colleagues noticed and his mother referenced, and his own reflection in the bathroom mirror accused him of every morning. The cruelties about her hair, the gradual, systematic replacement of her preferences with his, her opinions with his, her presence with his absence. He stopped introducing her at events. He started going to events alone. He started coming home late, then later, then not at all. And when she asked where he had been, he looked at her with the particular expression of a man who finds a question beneath him and said, "Do not start, Elena." Tessa Lee appeared in year 3. Not appeared, arrived. The way an occupying force arrives, with strategy and intention and the specific confidence of a woman who has identified a target and intends to acquire it regardless of existing ownership. She was everything Elena was not. Blonde, polished, the daughter of someone whose name opened doors rather than cleaned behind them. She worked in Marcus's department. She attended the firm events that Elena no longer attended. She filled the spaces that Marcus had systematically emptied of his wife. Elena knew about Tessa. She knew in the way that wives know, through the accumulation of evidence that does not require confirmation because the body confirms it before the mind does. The late nights, the new cologne, the phone turned face down on every surface, the decreasing frequency of eye contact, the increasing frequency of criticism, because guilt in men like Marcus does not produce remorse but resentment, the paradoxical anger of a man who blames the person he is wronging for the discomfort of the wrong. She did not confront him. This was not weakness. This was calculation. The specific, instinctive calculation of a woman who has been compressed and knows, without being able to articulate it, that confrontation without power is just noise. She waited. She endured. She watched her marriage disintegrate from the inside while maintaining, on the outside, the appearance of a woman who had not yet noticed that her house was on fire. And then her mother died, and Marcus locked the door, and the tectonic plates shifted. They let her out on the 4th day. Not Marcus. Cordelia. Cordelia Belworth arrived at the house at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday with a casserole and a grievance. The casserole was for appearances. The grievance was genuine. She had come to inform Elena that the funeral costs needed to be settled, and that Marcus should not be expected to pay them because Ruth Harlow was not a Bellworth and the Bellworth family should not be financially associated with. And Cordelia paused here, searching for the word with the theatrical precision of a woman who had already selected it. That element. That element. Elena's mother. The woman who had scrubbed floors for 37 years so her daughter could eat. That element. Cordelia unlocked the bedroom door because she needed Elena to hear this speech in person, because cruelty delivered through a door loses some of its precision. She stood in the doorway, silver-haired, immaculate, wearing a cream blazer that cost more than Ruth's monthly rent had been, and she delivered her message with the particular satisfaction of a woman who enjoys reminding others of their place. Elena listened. She stood in the bedroom that had been her cell for 4 days, unwashed, unfed, wearing the same clothes she had been wearing when Marcus locked the door, and she listened to her mother-in-law describe her dead mother as a financial liability. The estate attorney called, Cordelia added, almost as an afterthought. Apparently your mother had a will. God knows what she thought she had to leave. A mop, perhaps. She laughed. The thin, performative laugh of a woman who finds her own cruelty witty. You should probably handle that. Go to the attorney's office. Get it done. And Elena. She paused in the doorway. Tessa will be joining us for dinner on Thursday. Try to be presentable. Cordelia left. The front door closed. The sound of her car engine faded, and Elena stood in the bedroom doorway, free for the first time in 4 days, and felt the shift complete. She showered. She dressed. She ate 2 pieces of toast, which was all her stomach would accept after 4 days of nothing. She called the car because her keys were still missing, and she went to the attorney's office. The attorney's name was Thomas Calloway. Small office. Downtown. The kind of office that served clients who could not afford the glass towers uptown, clients whose legal needs were modest, and whose estates were small, and whose deaths did not make the news. Elena sat in a chair across from Thomas Calloway's desk and expected to hear about a savings account with a few $1,000s. A piece of furniture, perhaps the cleaning equipment that Ruth had accumulated over 3 decades, the commercial vacuums and the steamers and the supply inventory that represented the physical infrastructure of a life spent in service. Thomas Calloway opened a file. He looked at Elena. He looked at the file. He looked at Elena again with an expression that she could not immediately classify, but that she would later identify as the face of a man who is about to change someone's life and is experiencing the weight of it. Mrs. Bellworth, he said, your mother's estate is somewhat more substantial than you may be aware. How substantial? Thomas Calloway removed a document from the file. He placed it on the desk. He turned it so that Elena could read it. She read it. She read it again. She read it a third time because the number on the page could not possibly be correct, because numbers like that did not appear in the estates of cleaning women, because numbers like that did not exist in the world that Elena inhabited, the world of reversed locks and payment plan rings and casseroles delivered with cruelty. $850 million. I do not understand, she said. Her voice was very far away, coming from somewhere outside her body. The voice of a woman whose reality had just been rewritten in a single line of text. Your mother, Thomas Calloway said, with the careful precision of a man who had been rehearsing this conversation, began investing in commercial real estate 31 years ago. She started with a single property, a small office building that she purchased with savings from her cleaning business. She maintained her cleaning contracts as cover, as income, and as what she described in her personal notes as the work that keeps me honest. But her investment portfolio grew significantly. He opened a second file: property deeds, portfolio statements, corporate registrations, pages and pages of documentation that mapped, in meticulous financial detail, the secret empire that Ruth Harlow had built over 3 decades while the world saw nothing but a woman with a mop. She owned 17 commercial properties across 5 health chains. She was the anonymous founding donor of the Harlow Foundation, which funds educational scholarships for children of service workers. And she named you, Elena, as the sole beneficiary of the entire estate. Elena stared at the documents, at the numbers, at the property addresses, some of which she recognized, buildings she had walked past, hotels she had looked at through lobby windows, structures that were part of the landscape of her daily life, and that were, she was now learning, owned by her mother, by the cleaning woman, by that element. There was a letter, sealed, her mother's handwriting on the envelope. Elena. She opened it. She read it in the attorney's office with tears running down her face for the first time in days. Not tears of grief, but tears of the specific, overwhelming emotion that occurs when you discover that the person you loved most in the world loved you back in ways you never imagined. My dear Elena, I know you think I was just a cleaning woman. I was. I was also more. I built this for you, not so you would never have to work, but so you would never have to stay. Stay in a room you cannot leave. Stay in a life that makes you small. Stay with anyone who makes you forget what you are worth. This money is not your inheritance. Your freedom is your inheritance. The money is just a tool. Use it well. Use it without mercy. And when you're done, build something that would make a cleaning woman proud. Oh, my love, always. Mom. Elena folded the letter. She placed it in her bag. She looked at Thomas Calloway. I need a lawyer, she said. Not an estate attorney. A divorce attorney. The best one in the city. And I need a private investigator. And I need both of them to understand that everything we do from this moment forward is confidential. Nothing reaches Marcus Belworth or his family until I am ready. Thomas Calloway studied her. Whatever he saw in her face, in the tear-streaked, sleep-deprived, 4 days locked in a room face of a woman who had just discovered she was worth $850 million, satisfied him. I know exactly who to call, he said. 3 weeks. That was how long Elena gave herself. 3 weeks to dismantle a life, build a weapon, and prepare for the single most satisfying evening of her existence. She told no one. This was critical. The strategy required absolute secrecy, the maintenance of her existing persona, the compressed, diminished, invisible wife. While behind that persona, a machine was being assembled with the precision and resources of a woman who had just inherited the GDP of a small nation. She went home. She cooked dinner. She endured Tessa's presence at the Thursday meal that Cordelia had arranged, sitting at her own dining table, while Tessa Lee sat in the chair that had been Elena's for 4 years, and ate from plates that Elena had purchased, and laughed at jokes that Marcus made with the specific energy of a man performing for a woman who was not his wife, while his wife sat 3 feet away and said nothing. Tessa was wearing a bracelet. Elena noticed it immediately. A thin gold chain with a small pearl charm. The bracelet that Ruth had given Elena on her 18th birthday. The bracelet that had been in Elena's jewelry box. The jewelry box that was in the bedroom that Marcus had locked her in. The bedroom that Tessa had apparently accessed while Elena was gone, browsing through her things with the proprietary confidence of a woman who considers herself the upgrade. Elena looked at the bracelet on Tessa's wrist. She looked at Marcus, who was pouring wine and did not notice. She looked at Cordelia, who was watching her with the particular expression of a woman who expects a reaction and is prepared to enjoy it. Elena smiled. That is a lovely bracelet, Tessa. Tessa glanced at her wrist. The briefest flicker of awareness. The micro-expression of someone who knows they are wearing something that does not belong to them and has decided not to care. Thank you. Marcus gave it to me. It suits you, Elena said, and returned her meal. She did not mention that the bracelet was worth approximately $4. It was not gold. It was gold-plated. Her mother had bought it from a street vendor when Elena was 17, a year before the birthday, and had kept it in a kitchen drawer until the occasion arrived. Its value was not material. Its value was that Ruth Harlow had thought about her daughter's birthday a full year in advance, and had spent $4 she could not afford on a bracelet that she presented with the specific pride of a woman giving the best she had. Tessa Lee was wearing Elena's most precious possession, and thought it was costume jewelry. Marcus had given it away without knowing what it was. The ignorance was so complete, so total, so perfectly representative of everything they did not understand about value, that Elena almost admired it. She went to bed that night and lay in the dark and planned. The divorce attorney was a woman named Jessica Park. Ruthless, efficient, the kind of attorney who charged $900 an hour and was worth every cent because she did not merely win cases, but architecturally demolished opposing parties, leaving them legally, financially, and psychologically unable to recover. Jessica Park reviewed the marriage. She reviewed the prenuptial agreement, which did not exist, because Marcus had not thought Elena had anything worth protecting. She reviewed the financial records, which revealed that Marcus had been systematically accessing Elena's modest salary for personal expenses, credit card payments, and purchases that included, Jessica noted with controlled fury, approximately $14,000 in gifts for Tessa Lee over the past 18 months. He has been spending your money on her, Jessica said. They were in Jessica's office. Glass Tower, uptown. The kind of office that served clients who could afford it and that Elena, as of 3 weeks ago, could afford several hundred times over. Your salary, your savings, the joint account that you funded almost exclusively. He has been draining it. I know, Elena said. You know, I have known for approximately 6 months. I did not have the resources to do anything about it. Now I do. Jessica Park studied her client. The assessment of a woman who had seen hundreds of divorce cases and who recognized, in the particular calm of Elena's voice, something she did not often encounter. Not anger, not desperation, but strategy. What exactly do you want to do? Jessica asked. Elena opened her bag. She removed a folder. Inside the folder were the documents that the private investigator had compiled over 3 weeks. Photographs, financial records, communications, a comprehensive dossier on the personal and professional life of Marcus Belworth that contained, among other things, evidence that Marcus had been inflating his expense reports at the firm, evidence that Tessa Lee's position at the company had been secured through Marcus's manipulation of the hiring process, and evidence that Cordelia Belworth had been claiming charitable donations on her taxes for contributions she had never actually made. I want to freeze every asset he has. I want the divorce filed on grounds that will ensure he receives nothing. And I want it done quietly, without his knowledge, until the exact moment I choose to reveal it. When would that be? Elena smiled. The smile that had been building for 3 weeks. The smile that was not pleasant, and was not performed, and was not the accommodating expression of a wife who had spent 4 years making herself small. It was the smile of a woman who had been locked in a room while her mother was buried and who had discovered, in the wreckage, that she owned the building. The Belworth Foundation Charity Gala, she said. 2 weeks from Saturday. Marcus and Cordelia are co-hosting. It is the social event of their year. 400 guests. Press coverage. The event where they perform their generosity for an audience and reinforce their position in society. She paused. I want to attend. Jessica Park's eyebrows rose. You have not been invited. No, I have not. But I have spent the last week discovering something very interesting about the Belworth Foundation's Charity Gala. The venue. The Carrington Hotel on Fifth Avenue. Do you know who owns the Carrington Hotel? Jessica looked at her. The eyebrows descended. The mouth curved. The expression of an attorney who has just realized that her client is not merely wealthy, but strategically gifted. You own the Carrington Hotel, Jessica said. My mother owned the Carrington Hotel. I inherited it 3 weeks ago, along with the catering company that supplies the event, and the floral service. And, as it happens, the foundation's primary endowment fund, which my mother established anonymously 7 years ago, and which has been funding 73% of the Belworth Foundation's operating budget without the Belworth's knowledge. The office was quiet. Jessica Park sat behind her desk and processed the implications. The Belworth family's signature charity event, the centerpiece of their social identity, was funded, housed, catered, and decorated by assets belonging to the woman they had locked in a bedroom and called that element's daughter. You're going to pull the rug out, Jessica said. I'm going to pull the building out from under the rug, Elena said. And I'm going to do it in front of everyone they have ever tried to impress. The Carrington Hotel ballroom was full. 400 guests. Crystal chandeliers. A string quartet. The particular atmosphere of concentrated wealth and social performance that characterized events where the primary currency was not money but visibility, where being seen mattered more than being genuine, where the appearance of generosity was indistinguishable from generosity itself. Marcus Belworth stood at the entrance, greeting guests. He was wearing a tuxedo that Elena recognized because she had purchased it 2 years ago for their anniversary dinner. The dinner he had canceled because Tessa had tickets to something and he had decided, without informing Elena, that his plans had changed. The tuxedo had hung in the closet since then, unworn by its intended purpose, now repurposed for an event where Marcus would stand beside a woman who was not his wife and perform the role of philanthropist for an audience that did not know the performance was funded by the woman he had locked in a room. Tessa was beside him. She was wearing a green gown. She was also wearing Elena's pearl bracelet, the $4 street vendor bracelet that she believed was a gift from Marcus, and that Marcus believed was costume jewelry, and that was, in fact, the most valuable thing either of them had ever touched, not in monetary terms, but in the terms that mattered, the terms that neither of them would ever understand. Cordelia was inside, holding court, silver hair, cream jacket, the matriarch in her element, surrounded by the social circle she had spent decades cultivating, the church group and the charity board and the neighborhood association, the infrastructure of respectable appearances that she maintained with the same meticulous attention that Ruth Harlow had maintained her cleaning routes. The gala was underway. The speeches were beginning. Marcus was preparing to take the stage, to deliver the keynote about the Foundation's mission and its commitment to community and the values of service. Words that would come out of his mouth with practiced sincerity while his wife sat locked in a bedroom 12 miles away. Except his wife was not locked in a bedroom 12 miles away. His wife was walking through the ballroom doors. Elena had dressed for this, not in the clothes she could afford, which was now everything, in the clothes that communicated. A black gown, simple, architectural, the kind of garment that did not shout wealth but stated it, the quiet authority of a woman who did not need embellishment because the fabric spoke for itself. Her hair was down. Her makeup was minimal. She wore no jewelry except a single ring on her right hand. Her mother's ring, plain silver, the ring that Ruth had worn every day while she cleaned offices and invested millions and built an empire that nobody saw. She walked into the ballroom, and 400 guests did not recognize her. Not because she looked different, because they had never looked at her in the first place. She had been invisible in this world, the wife who did not attend events, the woman whose name was mentioned in passing and forgotten immediately, the person who existed only as an appendage to Marcus, and who, without Marcus beside her, registered as no one. Marcus saw her. He was on the stage, microphone in hand. Mid-sentence, he saw her enter the ballroom, and his sentence stopped. His mouth remained open. The particular facial expression of a man whose brain has received information that it cannot process, because the information contradicts every assumption the brain has been operating on. Elena walked through the ballroom. She did not hurry. She did not hesitate. She walked with the specific pace of a woman who has calculated the exact amount of time that a 400-person room needs to notice her, and who is providing that time without rushing past it. She reached the front of the ballroom. She looked up at Marcus on the stage. She smiled. "Hello, Marcus," she said. Her voice carried, not because she raised it, because the ballroom was silent. 400 people who had been chattering and drinking and performing their social functions had stopped, collectively, to watch whatever was happening between the man on the stage and the woman they did not recognize. Elena. Marcus's voice was a whisper amplified by the microphone. The whisper of a man who is experiencing the sensation of his carefully constructed reality developing structural cracks. "What are you doing here?" "I'm attending the gala. It is open to the public, is it not?" "You were not invited." "I was not. But I own the building, so I thought I would make an exception." The silence changed quality. It went from confused to electric. 400 sets of ears processed the sentence, and 400 brains arrived, simultaneously, at the same question. "She owns the building?" Elena turned. She addressed the room. Not Marcus. The room. The 400 guests who had never seen her, and were now seeing her for the first time, and were about to see considerably more than they expected. "Good evening. My name is Elena Harlow. Some of you may know me as Elena Bellworth, wife of Marcus. Most of you do not know me at all, because my husband and his family have spent 4 years ensuring that I remain invisible. I am here tonight to become very, very visible." She reached into the small clutch she carried. She removed a remote control. She pressed a button. Behind her, the massive screen that had been displaying the Foundation's promotional video changed. It now displayed a photograph. Elena, 4 days ago, in the locked bedroom, taken through the window by the private investigator she had hired. The photograph showed the reverse lock on the door, the barred window, the untouched food tray that Marcus had shoved under the door on day 2, the phone on the floor with the dead battery. "This is where I was 3 weeks ago," Elena said, "locked in my own bedroom by my husband while my mother's funeral took place 12 miles away." I watched the burial on my phone until the battery died. My husband locked me in because my grief was inconvenient and because his girlfriend needed the car. The screen changed. A second photograph. Tessa Lee in Elena's kitchen, wearing Elena's black lace dress. The dress Elena had saved for 4 months to buy. The dress intended for her mother's funeral. This is the dress I purchased for the funeral I was not allowed to attend. It is being worn by my husband's girlfriend, who moved into my home while my mother was dying and who is here tonight. She looked at Tessa. Tessa was standing near the bar. The green gown, the pearl bracelet, the face of a woman experiencing the specific terror of being named in public and understanding, for the first time, that there is nowhere to hide when 400 people are looking at you. The screen changed again. Financial documents, bank statements, transaction records, the $14,000 in gifts, the drained joint account, the expense report fraud, the evidence laid out with the clean, clinical precision of a case that has already been won. Over the past 18 months, my husband has transferred approximately $14,000 from our joint account to purchase gifts for Tessa Lee. He has also submitted fraudulent expense reports to his employer, totaling $31,000. This information has been provided to his firm's compliance department and to the appropriate legal authorities. Marcus was no longer on the stage. He had descended at some point during the presentation, his body performing the involuntary retreat of a man whose exposure is occurring in real time and who is physically attempting to move away from the evidence, even though the evidence is on a screen 20 feet wide and visible to every person in the room. But the financial fraud is not why I am here, Elena said. I am here because of this. The screen changed. A corporate ownership document. The deed to the Carrington Hotel. Ruth Harlow's name at the top. Elena Harlow listed as successor and sole beneficiary. My mother, Ruth Harlow, was a cleaning woman. She cleaned offices and hotels and private homes for 37 years. She was also, as I learned 3 weeks ago, the owner of 17 commercial properties, including this hotel. She held controlling interests in 2 hotel chains. She was the anonymous founder of the Harlow Foundation, which funds educational scholarships for children of service workers. She paused, let the information settle, watched 400 faces recalculate. She was also the anonymous primary donor of the Bellworth Foundation. The screen displayed the foundation's financial records, the endowment fund, the donation history, Ruth Harlow's anonymous contributions, tracked and documented, comprising 73% of the foundation's total funding over the past 7 years. The charity gala you are attending tonight. The venue, owned by my mother. The catering company, owned by my mother. The floral arrangements, supplied by a company owned by my mother. The foundation itself, funded primarily by my mother. The cleaning woman. The element. The woman whose funeral my husband would not let me attend because he did not consider her worth the interruption. She looked at Cordelia. The silver hair. The cream jacket. The face that was no longer holding court because it was no longer capable of holding anything. The facial muscles having surrendered to the particular paralysis that occurs when a person's entire social identity collapses in real time. Mrs. Bellworth, you described my mother as that element at my own dinner table. You told me that the Bellworth family should not be financially associated with her. I want you to know that the Bellworth family has been financially dependent on her for 7 years. Every gala, every donation receipt, every tax deduction you have claimed for charitable giving that my mother's money paid for. All of it. Hers. Cordelia's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Behind her, the social circle she had cultivated for decades was performing the rapid recalculation of people who have just discovered that the matriarch they followed is not what she claimed, that the wealth they admired was borrowed, that the superiority they deferred to was built on a foundation donated by the very person the matriarch despised. Elena turned back to the room. As of this morning, I have withdrawn all funding from the Bellworth Foundation. The endowment has been transferred to the Harlow Foundation, which will continue its mission of supporting families like mine, families where the parents clean floors and the children dream bigger. The Carrington Hotel will no longer host Bellworth events. The catering and floral contracts have been terminated. She looked at Marcus. He was standing near the stage steps. His tuxedo, the anniversary tuxedo, was rumpled from his descent. His face was the face she had imagined during 3 weeks of planning. The face of a man watching every pillar of his constructed life being removed simultaneously and understanding. with the particular horror of the mediocre, that every pillar had been placed there by someone he had treated as nothing. You locked me in a room, she said, quietly now, for him. But the ballroom was silent enough that every person heard. You locked me in a room while my mother was buried. You gave my bracelet to your girlfriend. You called my mother a cleaning woman, as if that was an insult. You spent 4 years making me invisible because you thought invisible meant powerless. She paused. I was never powerless, Marcus. I was patient. There is a difference. She reached for the remote one final time. Pressed a button. The screen displayed a legal document. A divorce filing. Dated 3 days prior. Grounds: financial fraud, emotional abuse, unlawful imprisonment. My attorney will be in contact. The assets have been frozen. The evidence has been filed. And the marriage, such as it was, is over. She turned. She walked toward the ballroom doors. 400 guests parted. Not because she asked them to. Because they moved. The involuntary movement of people in the presence of someone whose authority is not performed but earned. Not inherited but built. Not loud but undeniable. At the door, she stopped. She turned back. She looked at Tessa, who was still standing by the bar, the green gown, the pearl bracelet, the face of a woman whose investment has just been revealed as worthless. Tessa, the bracelet you are wearing. It is not gold. It is gold-plated. My mother bought it from a street vendor for $4. She gave it to me on my 18th birthday. It is the most valuable thing I own, not because of what it cost, but because of who gave it to me. You may keep it. You will never understand what it is worth. She walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, through the front doors of the Carrington Hotel, her mother's hotel, into the night air that was cool and clean and full of the particular silence that follows detonation. Behind her, the gala was over. The 400 guests were not staying. They were leaving, filtering out in the rapid, uncomfortable exodus of people who have just witnessed a social demolition and who are eager to discuss it somewhere that does not contain the rubble. Marcus was standing in the ballroom, alone, surrounded by empty chairs and abandoned champagne glasses and the massive screen still displaying his divorce filing. Cordelia was sitting in a chair near the stage, her phone in her hand, calling numbers that were not answering, reaching out to the social network that was, even now, performing the rapid recalculation that would result in her quiet, permanent exclusion from the circles she had spent decades infiltrating. Tessa was gone. She had left through a side door approximately 90 seconds after Elena's departure, moving with the efficient speed of a woman who has identified a sinking ship and who intends to be on a lifeboat before it goes under. She would not return to Marcus. She would not return the bracelet. She would disappear into the specific anonymity that awaits people who have attached themselves to power and discover that the power was never real. Elena did not go home. There was no home to go to, and had never felt like hers, and contained nothing she wanted except the pearl bracelet, which she had surrendered deliberately, because letting go of it was the final act of letting go of the woman who had tolerated its theft. She went to a hotel, not the Carrington, a different one, a small, quiet place where no one knew her name, and the room was clean, and the bed was hers alone, and the door locked from the inside. She lay in the dark. She held her mother's letter. She read it again by the light of her phone. Use it well. Use it without mercy. And when you are done, build something that would make a cleaning woman proud. She had used it without mercy. The first instruction was complete. The second instruction was beginning. In the morning, she called Thomas Calloway. She called Jessica Park. She called the board of the Harlow Foundation. She began. 6 months later, the Harlow Foundation had expanded from a scholarship fund into a comprehensive support system for service workers and their families. Job training, financial literacy, childcare, legal aid, healthcare navigation. The infrastructure of dignity built by a woman who understood, from 37 years of watching her mother work, exactly what dignity required and exactly how rarely it was provided. Elena ran the foundation herself, not as a figurehead, as the operational director. The woman who had spent 4 years being invisible had spent those 4 years observing, learning, absorbing the mechanics of organizations and the dynamics of power and the specific ways that systems fail the people they are supposed to serve. She was, it turned out, exceptionally good at building systems that did not fail. The foundation's offices were in a building that Ruth Harlow had purchased 23 years ago, a modest commercial space downtown that had appreciated in value by 800% and that now housed the organization that bore her name. On the wall of Elena's office was a photograph of Ruth. Not a formal portrait, a snapshot. Ruth in her cleaning uniform, mop in hand, standing in the lobby of the Carrington Hotel, smiling at the camera with the specific pride of a woman who owned the building. She was cleaning and found the secret hilarious. Elena looked at that photograph every morning. She looked at her mother's face and saw the woman she had known, the cleaning woman, the early riser, the provider, the person who had never once, in 37 years, complained about the work or the hours or the assumptions that people made about her based on the uniform she wore. She also saw the woman she had not known, the investor, the strategist, the quiet architect of an empire built in the margins of a life that the world dismissed. Both women were her mother. Both women were extraordinary. The world had only seen one of them. Elena intended to ensure that the world saw both. Marcus Belworth was not in prison. The financial fraud charges had resulted in termination from his firm and a civil settlement that consumed the entirety of his personal assets, which were stripped of Elena's contributions and the social infrastructure that her mother's money had funded, negligible. He was living in a one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city. The divorce was final. He had received nothing. He called Elena once, 3 months after the gala. She did not answer. He left a voicemail. She listened to it once. It contained the word sorry, repeated several times, interspersed with explanations that were not explanations, but justifications, the particular vocabulary of a man who was apologizing for the consequences rather than the actions. She deleted it. She did not think about it again. Cordelia Belworth's social exile was comprehensive and permanent. The church group, the charity board, the neighborhood association, one by one, the pillars of her social identity withdrew their support, not out of moral outrage, but out of the practical calculation that association with a family whose fraud had been publicly exposed on a 20-foot screen was a liability that no amount of casseroles could offset. She was last seen at a grocery store by a mutual acquaintance, silver hair, less immaculate than usual, buying store-brand cereal, wearing an expression that the acquaintance described as the face of someone who has woken from a dream and found the waking world inhospitable. Elena did not feel satisfaction at their decline. She had expected to. She had imagined, during the 3 weeks of planning, that their downfall would produce a sensation of triumph, the cathartic release of 4 years of compression. But the sensation she felt was not triumph. It was something quieter, something that felt less like victory and more like accuracy, the specific piece of a world that has been corrected, where the values are properly assigned and the people are properly seen, and the cleaning woman's daughter is standing, finally, in the place her mother built for her. She stood in that place. She stood in her mother's building, in front of her mother's photograph, wearing her mother's silver ring, and she understood something that her mother had understood for 37 years, and that the Belworths had never understood and would never understand. Value is not what people see when they look at you. Value is what remains when they stop looking. It is the building you own while you mop the floor. It is the empire you build while they call you that element. It is the inheritance you leave, not of money, but of the unshakable knowledge that you are always, always, always more than they thought. Elena Harlow sat in her office in the morning light and felt, in the deep, quiet place where her mother lived and her grief lived and her rage had lived and her patience had lived and her power had always lived, the specific, luminous piece of a woman who has finally been seen. Not by the world. The world's vision was unreliable. Not by Marcus or Cordelia or Tessa or any of the 400 guests who had watched her walk out of a ballroom and into legend. By herself. She had been seen by herself. And that, she understood now, was the only vision that had ever mattered. She picked up her phone. She called her foundation's program director. She began the work of the day. Building. Growing. Making a cleaning woman proud. The day was long. The work was hard. The coffee was good. And the door locked from the inside. If this story made your heart race, if you felt the cold of that locked room and the heat of that ballroom and the quiet, unbreakable strength of a woman who turned patience into power, then you already know you want to be here when the next story vacations. Because the stories that stay with you are the stories about people who are underestimated by everyone except themselves. And those stories, the real ones, are only just beginning. See you next time.